Hello. Today's notes are going to start to cover some of the basic measurement stuff that we're going to do in chemistry. There's really two parts to these notes. We need to go over a few of the basic measuring instruments that we're going to use and take a look at those and how to use those appropriately and what the measurements might look like when we use those pieces of equipment. And then we also need to look at the actual measurements themselves and what they mean. We've already talked about the significant figure part of those measurements, and we'll review that a little as we go. But we also need to talk about a few of the terms that get thrown around quite a bit, like accuracy and precision, because a lot of times people use those words to mean exactly the same thing, and they don't exactly necessarily mean the same thing depending upon their usage. So we will talk about a couple of different things at a few different places. We will pause this video and then go and watch some other YouTubes on the individual pieces of equipment themselves. I've got those set up as some separate YouTube videos, and we'll just kind of go that way. At the end, of course, we're going to have some practice. So let's start to talk about these a little bit and see where we might go. To begin with, a couple of the more common measuring instruments we're going to use are going to be our good old wooden centimeter rulers. We'll talk as we get into this. It's a little bit confusing for students because, let me flip it over for a moment. On this side it says centimeters. And yep, absolutely, each number here with each big line measures 1 centimeter. If we flip it over to the other edge, all of a sudden now it says millimeters, so somehow students seem to think that these big numbers now represent millimeters, but no, actually these big numbers still represent the centimeters. Right? The millimeters, though, are represented more by these little lines, and once again, as we talk about the ruler in particular, we'll get back into that and take a look at that. The other piece of measuring equipment we're going to talk about today is called the graduated cylinder. We talked about these briefly when we looked at some of our pieces of equipment in here. This one's kind of hard to read, and let me just see if I can kind of turn the projector here a little bit and maybe move it a little so you can get a little bit better picture of what that might look like. And there we go. Probably not going to focus now. Come on, camera. Let me autofocus. Maybe, maybe not. It's not focusing very well this morning. But what we need to talk about is on all of these little lines here, exactly how do we use those to determine a measurement inside of some sort of volume. Depending upon where the volume might end up, somewhere, down in this region, exactly what that measurement be. And so we will look at that in another video here shortly. But those are our two main pieces of equipment that we'll use to measure things, our good old centimeter ruler and our graduated cylinder. So if we know how to read those two pieces of equipment, along with just a regular electronic balance, we should be good for measuring most of the things in our labs. So when we do take a measurement, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. It's highly unlikely, no matter which of these measuring instruments we're going to use, either this or the graduated cylinder. Just a moment. I think I have a graduated cylinder here that has blue numbers. Maybe you can see that a little more easily. There we go. It's highly unlikely that when we take a measurement, it will end up exactly on one of either these black lines on the ruler or these blue or white lines, whichever on whichever graduated cylinder. And the way measurements work, we always measure to the last number that we actually know, and then we estimate the next number. Right? So we will talk about both of these devices separately and how that works. Right? I've got the one YouTube video for the ruler, another one for the graduated cylinder, but let me just kind of write that statement down in our notes. So once again, if we're kind of following the class notebook, we are on page 9 for the notes. We're going to do some examples on the page 8 before we're done with this little video. If you're not exactly on these pages, that's okay. We'll just have to make sure we keep our table of contents updated. So if we're taking a measurement in here, measurements always Right? And as you take notes, and part of the Cornell format is later we're going to be highlighting things and underlining things. There are some things that I think are really important. I just kind of underline them as we go. Once again, maybe you can highlight that later too to kind of make that point. But the important thing here is measurements always include one estimated number, digit, figure. And we talked about those the other day, the digits 0 through 9. So it's usually on the very farthest right, no matter if it's before or after the decimal. That last number is almost always estimated. It will count when we talk about significant figures. Right? So significant figures for measurements include all of those numbers you absolutely positively know, plus this one estimated number that is at the end. Okay, so we're going to stop this video. We're going to take our other two pieces of equipment and look at them separately. And then when we get done with that, we will come back here and look at a couple of examples and put them in our notes.